2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. And 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. I need 2½ teaspoons of baking powder, as well as a teaspoon of baking soda. Now this bundt cake is a swirl of pumpkin and chocolate cakes together. I do like the spice element. It matches the pumpkin well. And I'm going with a combination of a teaspoon of cinnamon and a teaspoon of ground ginger. Lastly, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'll sift this all together. Now in a separate bowl, I want to combine my wet ingredients. So I have 2 cups of pure pumpkin puree. Now this can be pumpkin that you buy, roast, and puree yourself, or you can buy it already tinned. Just make sure you're buying the unsweetened and unspiced version. I add 3/4 cup of buttermilk to the pumpkin. This really makes this cake nice and moist. I will add 2 eggs, and I do need a little bit of vegetable oil, 1/4 cup. And while I added my granulated sugar to my dry ingredients, my moist brown sugar, a cup's worth, I add to my wet ingredients. And I find by doing this, it dissolves into the wet mixture, and it really makes the cake easy to blend. So that way you don't need electric beaters or a stand mixer for a cake this fancy. There we go. Now I can add this all at once to my flour mixture, and I'll give this a stir to blend it. As you can see, this cake makes a lot of batter. It's ready for a bundt pan. And you know what? You can even stop right here and make just a regular pumpkin loaf cake. Even stir in some fresh cranberries. Wouldn't that be delicious? But I'm going for the wow factor, and I want to divide this in half and make half of this cake chocolate. I've got a separate bowl, and you don't have to precisely measure, but just loosely gauge half of the pumpkin batter. So this is going to be my regular pumpkin batter, and to this bowl, I'm going to sift in 1/2 cup of cocoa powder. That's all it takes to add a perfect amount of intense chocolate flavor. Because cocoa powder just is cocoa, no added sugar or other ingredients. Now because I am adding 1/2 cup more of dry ingredients to this batter, I need to balance out the liquid a little bit. So I add an additional 1/4 cup of buttermilk. The last thing to add, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. That way, both the pumpkin batter and the chocolate batter will have the same consistency. So this chocolate batter has that pumpkin flavor. And don't forget, it has the spices in there too, the cinnamon and ginger. And that combination of chocolate and pumpkin together, oh, it is divine. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Here is my bundt pan with the hole in the middle. The pan's well greased. Now, to fill my pans, what I like to do is dollop, alternating pumpkin and then chocolates. There we go. So I've got 1 full layer of alternating pumpkin and chocolate. And then for the top layer, I do the same thing and I place the pumpkin on top of the chocolate layer beneath it. Kind of making a pumpkin chocolate checkerboard. Go. And the final step is the swirling. And I find because of the density of the cake and the depth of the pan, I like to use a spatula or even a paring knife. And I pull it right through the bottom of the cake. Don't be afraid to swirl. I'll give the pan a little tap to level out the batter a little bit. And now this is ready for the oven. So typical to loaf cakes, it takes a while. 60 to 75 minutes in a 350 oven. check the doneness, I'll insert a skewer in the center of the cake. It comes out clean, so I know it's done. Now, your variation in timing from 60 to 75 minutes really can depend on the consistency of your pumpkin puree. That's why there's such a time range. I'll let that cool for a bit, then I'll turn it out of the pan to cool completely. And you know what's in store, the butterscotch glaze, the finishing touch for a perfect bundt cake. A bundt cake is a loaf cake that